I heard that China is giving considerable support, technical, logistical, as well as, well, we know about the satellite data that they give to the IRGC, but apparently there's through Pakistan and through the Caspian. Apparently, they're providing considerable military support in terms of, and I know that they make a lot of the chips for the guidance of the drones and missiles. One of the things that kind of struck me as unusual is that when they hit the radar plane, the X, I think, kind of radar plane, it was a pretty precision strike, and I was kind of surprised because my image of the IRGC missiles, even their missiles, their drones especially, is that they weren't very accurate, and that they would just be hitting populations, civilian populations, primarily. So my concern is that this is kind of turning into a proxy war, and it seems like the IRGC, all they have to do is kind of hang on by their nails, right? But in terms of just kind of like weather the storm in terms
Mhm.
of what's coming in, and if they can just hold on long enough, it'll turn into a shit show, and then eventually, with the Strait of Hormuz and the global economy, blah blah blah. Eventually, the political capital of Trump will run out, and they will survive to live another day, live to fight another day, right? And possibly turn Iran into a North Korea, which would be the ultimate nightmare for every Iranian. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so you're completely correct to be concerned about the fact that the Islamic Republic, with even if you destroy so many of their abilities, as long as they have some equipment to be able to cause uh, to be able to cause some issues at the Strait of Hormuz, and also some manpower to be able to show some force within Iran against the Iranian people, as that by itself would be enough for them to demonstrate that they're still alive, and the Americans do not have enough political capital to stay here forever, and all they have to do is just survive this. They don't have to win against the Americans, they just have to stay alive. And then once the Americans are gone, they have enough oil and gas to be able to rebuild everything that they have lost. And you're right that the Chinese are selling a lot more advanced military equipment to them. I mean, they have the money; they can afford it right now, but with the oil and gas, right? Especially now that there's with the wartime conditions, they don't spend money on all of other stuff that they're supposed to spend money on to run the country. So most of their revenue goes towards just military operations. So they have a lot of wiggle room there. And when it comes to advanced military equipment, I wonder, the American plane that they just took down, the fighter jet that they just took down, it was taken out down by a manpad, probably a heat guided manpad that that is Chinese. Like, I don't know, but if it's Chinese, by the way, if it comes out that this was a Chinese equipment, it's going to really show Americans how big of a threat that it will become it will be demonstrating to a lot of Americans that this is a proxy war with the CCP. So everything you're saying is correct, that this might this but again, this goes back to us constantly saying that the only way to fix this is regime change, and how important the Iranian people are, as in this equation. And a lot of analysts are not taking that into account. Without regime change, with the help of the Iranian people, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road, and maybe even making the situation worse, because this whatever left of the regime is more determined to be anti-American and anti-Israeli, will be less interested in being moderate or peace or negotiations, and it would be even more hostile and aggressive to the countries around the Persian Gulf. And given now that they see how easy it is to control the Strait of Hormuz with very little ability, with very little military equipment, they might be wanting to be very motivated to make that a permanent thing, and basically just take absolute control over the Strait of Hormuz indefinitely, given that it just takes like 12 mines and a few drones to be able to do that, right? And with the Chinese help with more advanced military equipment, they will be able to do even more, right? That is why there's and no matter how many times you bomb their enrichment facilities, they have the knowledge, they know what to do to rebuild all of that, and they're spreading it all over Iran in a way that there's no way to stop them from enriching uranium unless you just get rid of them completely. This is why there is absolutely no solution to this other than getting the Iranian people to a point where you could do regime change. When you say Iran turning into a North Korea situation, the problem, I don't see that happening because the Iranian people are not like the North Korean people, right? The Iranian people are very different from the people of North Korea. They would not tolerate a North Korean situation, right? They will not tolerate that. They have seen freedom, they have seen prosperity. The Iranian people are connected to the rest of the world. The North Koreans they haven't seen what liberalism looks like. They haven't seen what freedom of speech looks like. They haven't seen how the rest of their world operates politically and economically, right? The Iranian people have seen all of that and want all of that, right? Many people in North Korea think that they have the best country on earth, and the rest of the world wants to be like North Korea. That's what they think. The Iranian people don't think that. So it's really hard to, the North Korean people have been raised inside a bubble, completely isolated from the rest of the world. So it's easier to maintain control over them. The Iranian people, not only they would not tolerate that, what happened to them early January has made them more determined than ever to do regime change. One thing I think that we should consider at some point is to just liberate just one city in southern Iran, just one city, and then use that as a base of operations for arming and training, not just arming. Okay, just handing out weapons to the Iranian people, I don't think it makes much sense. But on arming not just with guns but also drones, right? So having a city in southern Iran where it's liberated, where the Americans and Israelis use that as a base of operations for liberating the rest of Iran, but with arming and training the Iranian people to come to that, any Iranian who wants to be trained to liberate Iran. So basically raising an army of Iranians inside Iran, in southern Iran. That is something I think we should consider at this point. What do you think, Sedato?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I
Okay, for
saw.
the response list, we have Jeffrey.
Hey, I finally got in. the silent
Hey,
God smile on me. What's up, Armin?
hey,
So I'm going to touch base on, oops, sorry, some of the things that Armin said. He's pretty spot on. I don't think people are comparing when people say, not having the Mullah regime turn into Iran turn into North Korea, and that's, people think the way they speak, and that's why I make a point to say the Mullah regime that's illegally occupied Iran, because that's more an accurate descriptor, especially given the divergence between the nature and entomology of the Mullah regime that's illegally occupied Iran and Iranian people. That said, I think when they say stopping Iran from becoming North Korea, that when that's used by Senator Rubio, now Secretary of State Rubio, and people within the administration, I think they mean at a regime level, right? Except for it'll be worse. It would be worse than North Korea because North Korea is not pseudo theologically motivated. And that's the whole point of preemptive or preventative warfare, is to eliminate a threat before it crosses the asymmetric deterrence threshold defined as possession of ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. And it's also very true that the overall goal of this operation, as far as liberating Iran, is to reduce the Mullah regime's repressive capability, which is what we're in the latter stages of doing right now, so that the Iranian people have the best shot at taking back their country and liberating Iran from the mullahs that have occupied it. To that end, regarding track two material supports in training anti or counter, almost like well, it is neo Savak, to be a counter or an anti, a contrary element to take out the remnants of the Mullah regime IRGC that is not defected, laid down their arms, or have been eliminated. That's already happening. That's why I sent you some of the stuff I did, Armin, like a month and a half ago, to kind of keep you and Goldie and Tusi in the loop. right? Creating fighting facilities here to sit there and train the cadre, to train the trainers, to train the operatives that would then go out and do that. You're not wrong, though. Ideally, you want that to also be in southern Iran, or carve out something in the area that people can go to. So there's positives and negatives to that. The positive is they're like co-located right there where you have to do the job. That's true. Plus, you also get to sit there and get more acclimated, say, to the environment, right? Like during the Vietnam conflict, when LERPs would go overseas or they go out, like that's like long range reconnaissance patrol rangers and the like, they would eat indigenous food for about a week or two before they went out because you'd smell them in the bush, right? If you eat hamburger, you actually smell what they ate. In other words, it acclimates you to the nuances on the ground. The negatives is it also means you're directly available for anti or the remnant Mullah regime to target, which is why we looked at creating like 12 or 13 of those fighting facilities throughout the United States and Canada, and to get funding to do so, which is one of the reasons why I talked to Sapir 2 days ago about having leveraging her Metal Against Mullahs and the people that I know that are actually some of the largest. I'm almost done. Presenters, like the event presenters or organizers in the Northeast, and he's actually American of Iranian descent who fucking hates the mullahs, so that you can create your financial nest egg to support those efforts in a legal manner, right? We're already well in that process.